What happens when a country that stopped buying Iranian oil in 2019 suddenly resumes imports during a live regional conflict that is disrupting one of the world's most critical energy choke points? India, the world's third largest oil importer, has moved to secure crude supplies from Iran after a disruption linked to tensions around the Strait of Hormuz, a passage that typically carries close to 20% of global oil trade. This shift signals a potential recalibration in global energy flows. But it leaves open a deeper question about whether this is a temporary adjustment or the early stage of a broader structural change in how energy markets respond to geopolitical risk. If the situation escalates further, the implications extend well beyond India's procurement strategy. The Strait of Hormuz is not just a transit corridor. It is a pressure point where military tensions can immediately translate into supply shocks, price volatility, and strategic repositioning by major economies. If disruptions intensify, countries dependent on imported crude may face higher costs, forcing governments to intervene through subsidies, strategic reserves, or alternative sourcing. If the situation stabilizes, however, the temporary easing of restrictions on Iranian oil could reshape trade patterns by reintroducing a previously constrained supplier into the global market. The roots of this development trace back to 2018 and 2019, when the United States, under President Donald Trump, imposed maximum pressure sanctions on Iran, targeting its oil exports as a core revenue stream. By May 2019, India had halted Iranian crude imports under U.S. pressure, despite Iran previously being one of its key suppliers due to favorable pricing and logistical advantages. Over the following years, India diversified its sourcing, increasing imports from countries such as Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, while also expanding purchases from Russia after 2022. At the center of the current shift are multiple actors with overlapping but distinct motivations. India is primarily focused on energy security and price stability, seeking to ensure uninterrupted supply for an economy that consumes over 5 million barrels of oil per day. Iran, facing long-standing sanctions, aims to regain market share and secure revenue streams by re-entering major import markets. The United States, while historically enforcing sanctions, has temporarily relaxed restrictions on Iranian oil and refined products in response to supply concerns linked to the ongoing regional conflict involving U.S. and Israeli actions. Gulf producers are balancing market share with price stability, while global traders are adjusting to new risk calculations in shipping and insurance. Recent developments illustrate how quickly these dynamics are evolving. India's oil ministry has confirmed that refiners have secured crude requirements for the coming months, including supplies from Iran, and indicated that payment mechanisms are no longer a barrier under the current temporary policy environment. This marks the first confirmed Iranian crude engagement by India since May 2019. In parallel, India has imported 44,000 metric tons of Iranian liquefied petroleum gas delivered to the port of Mangalore, even though the vessel involved had previously been under sanctions. These transactions suggest a partial normalization of trade channels, at least under current conditions. The scale of India's import network provides additional context. The country sources crude from more than 40 nations, giving refiners flexibility to adjust procurement based on price and availability. However, not all sources are equal in terms of cost efficiency and shipping time. Iranian crude has historically been attractive due to its pricing structure and proximity, reducing freight costs compared to suppliers in the Atlantic Basin. This economic logic becomes more compelling when supply disruptions increase volatility elsewhere. One scenario to consider is a sustained escalation in tensions around the Strait of Hormuz. If maritime traffic is significantly reduced or threatened, global oil prices could rise sharply, potentially exceeding previous peaks observed during earlier geopolitical crises. In such a case, the temporary easing of sanctions on Iranian oil might evolve into a longer-term adjustment, allowing more countries to re-engage with Iranian supply as a stabilizing factor. This would effectively shift part of the global oil market away from strict sanctions compliance toward pragmatic supply management. A second scenario involves a rapid de-escalation of tensions and restoration of stable shipping flows. Under these conditions, the United States could reinstate stricter enforcement of sanctions on Iranian exports, reversing the current flexibility. India would likely revert to its diversified sourcing strategy, reducing or eliminating Iranian imports once again. This would reinforce the pre-existing structure of global oil trade, where geopolitical alignment plays a central role in determining access to supply. The broader geopolitical consequences depend on which trajectory materializes. A prolonged period of relaxed restrictions on Iranian oil could alter alliances by creating new economic linkages between Iran and major importers like India. It could also weaken the effectiveness of sanctions as a policy tool if countries perceive that enforcement can shift quickly in response to market pressures. On the other hand, a return to strict sanctions would reaffirm the role of political alignment in shaping energy markets, reinforcing existing partnerships between importers and Gulf producers. For the region, the situation underscores how energy infrastructure and geopolitical tensions remain tightly interconnected. The Strait of Hormuz continues to function as both a physical and strategic bottleneck, where even limited disruptions can trigger global ripple effects. For the global order, the episode highlights the tension between market stability and political strategy, particularly when major powers adjust policies to manage immediate risks. What emerges is not a definitive shift, but a conditional adjustment shaped by evolving circumstances. India's decision to engage with Iranian oil again reflects a pragmatic response to supply disruption rather than a clear long-term realignment. Whether this moment becomes a turning point depends on how sustained the current conditions prove to be, and how consistently policies are applied by key actors. As the situation develops, the critical variables to watch include the stability of shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, the duration of the U.S. policy shift on sanctions, and the responsiveness of global oil markets to renewed Iranian supply. These factors will determine whether this episode remains a short-term adaptation or signals a deeper transformation in how energy security is managed in a volatile geopolitical environment.